The bartender never even saw her. 2.5 hours. 2 rounds of drinks. Yet the woman he was ordering them for never actually appeared at that bar. He saw the husband twice, never saw her face. Somewhere between that final drink and 4 a.m. the next morning, she completely vanished. But that wasn't the detail that broke my investigation wide open. What cracked it was a photo time-stamped 6:34 p.m., plus 52 missing minutes that Brian Hooker has never been able to explain. That one piece of evidence changes everything. You and I are going to review exactly what the bartender confirmed on the official record. We'll examine the time-stamped photo Brian Hooker deliberately kept hidden from every single search and rescue team, and why the glaring gap between the surveillance footage and his police statement is the timeline I simply cannot ignore. Every single claim I lay out here traces back to a verified source. I don't do speculation. The victim is Lynette Hooker, 55 years old, from Onsted, Michigan. She wasn't some casual sailor who just stumbled onto a boat in her retirement years. She grew up around water her whole life. Her own mother confirmed that on record. Her daughter backed it up too. Fit strong, a solid swimmer since childhood. For more than 10 years, she and her husband documented their perfect life at sea. Sea turtles, ocean sunsets, and baking on the deck of a 55-foot sailboat they ironically named Soulmate. The kind of marriage that from the outside looking in seemed absolutely flawless to everyone. Her final social post was April 4th, the day she vanished. The caption read, "Not going anywhere for a while." A chilling choice of words. That evening, Brian and Lynette hit the Abaco Inn on Elbow Cay. Just a typical poolside bar on a Saturday night in the Bahamas. The sort of spot where the lights glow warm, the drinks stay cold, and everyone looks like they haven't got a care in the world. Ken was working the bar that night. 38 years old, a local from the Bahamas. He spent his whole life navigating the waters around Elbow Cay. He knows those local currents the exact same way. I know the back streets of my precinct. From his post at the bar, he watched boats make that crossing hundreds of times. He poured Brian Hooker 2 drinks that night. And in 2.5 hours, he never spotted Lynette. If you want the truth on this case, subscribe now. Ring that notification bell. Drop a comment down below and tell me your working theory. And if my case notes show you evidence the mainstream coverage missed, leave a like. Let's review the detail that flipped this investigation. It came from volunteer rescue worker Jim Todd. A volunteer for the Hopetown Fire and Rescue. He was one of the first responders to actually encounter Brian Hooker on April 5th, the morning after she vanished. He physically helped pull Brian from the shore at Marsh Harbor. He went back out on the rescue boat alongside Brian and the local police. He stood on the bow with Brian for roughly 10 minutes, watching as the husband tried pointing out exactly where Lynette went over the edge. But Brian couldn't give specifics. He claimed it was all confusing, said he wasn't really sure. At first, Jim chalked it up to alcohol and exhaustion. A husband surviving a traumatic night. Highly disoriented and deeply shaken up. It felt like a reasonable assumption back then. Then I uncovered the photograph, taken by Joe, a local fisherman who was hanging out at the Abaco Inn on the evening of April 4th. He had absolutely no connection to the couple, no reason to watch them. He was just shooting pictures of the scenery for his mother. The waves, the atmosphere, the classic beauty of a quiet Bahamian evening. And completely by accident, he captured a massive piece of evidence in the background. The image has a hard timestamp, 6:34 p.m., showing Brian and Lynette Hooker right by the inn's pool. You can clearly see Lynette wearing a light green bathing suit cover up a green shirt draped over whatever she had on underneath. Caught on camera, exactly 4 minutes before the inn's surveillance recorded the suspect and victim walking toward the dock. 6:34 the photo. 6:38 the security video. Both of them walking to the dinghy. Let's take those 2 timestamps and line them up against what Brian Hooker told Bahamian police. He claimed they pushed off around 7:30 p.m. 7:30. But the security camera catches them at 6:38. That is a 52-minute gap. That is not just fuzzy memory. It is not the normal timeline discrepancy of a guy mixing up 7:10 with 7:20. 52 missing minutes. And that blind spot feeds right into the most crucial pillar of his entire alibi. The darkness. He swore to investigators that the weather turned nasty, high winds, rough water, fading light. He claimed it was so pitch black when Lynette went over that she vanished instantly. That pitch black setting is the structural foundation of his whole story. why he couldn't find his missing wife out there. Now witness Jim Todd was dining nearby. He walked in just before 7:30 p.m. His memory of that evening is sharp. He told Ashley Banfield straight out between 7:30 and 7:45 p.m. the wind howled. The sky blackened. No seasoned sailor expects to see vessels moving in weather like that. But hit rewind to 6:38 when camera evidence spots them walking down the dock. Jim confirmed a hard, indisputable fact. At 6:38 p.m. on April 4th out on that water, it wasn't dark. It wasn't dusk. It was broad daylight. Crystal clear, undeniable afternoon sun. And that sun wasn't dropping for another 45 minutes to an hour. If they cast off at 6:38, whatever went down happened in broad daylight, not the pitch blackness he sold us. Yet he told patrol units they left at 7:30. That is 52 dead minutes. And for every single tick of that clock, nobody saw Lynette. Stick with me here because we need to talk about the green cover-up. Jim Todd testified this exact clue broke Brian's facade for him. April 5th. Morning light. Standing right on the bow of the rescue boat, Jim asks the husband what his wife wore into the water. In my line of work, that isn't small talk. In any marine search operation, that clothing profile is the absolute target. Every Coast Guard crew is hunting for exactly what you describe. The suspect's answer never wavered. Every single time they pressed him from Jim on the bow to the Marine rescue squads running dispatch, the husband repeated the exact same thing. Black two-piece bathing suit. That became the active bulletin. A missing woman wearing a black two-piece. But look at the crime scene photo from 6:34 p.m. Lynette is wearing a light green cover-up. Neon green. Highly visible. Buoyant. The exact kind of fabric a trained recovery team would spot immediately if only they knew they were hunting for it. He never uttered a word about it. Not to Jim, not to the dive teams, not in a single police report filed during the massive manhunt for his missing wife. The witness told the reporter point blank, finding out about that green fabric completely shattered his belief in the husband's alibi. You and I know exactly what that implies. A suspect who sees his wife drown just 4 minutes after snapping a photo of her in bright green does not just magically forget the green, not if he actually wants her found alive. An innocent man screams green immediately. Green stands out against the black ocean. Green floats on the surface. It is a beacon. He never said it. Not once. Not to his buddies, not to the cops. Not in any documented official statement on record. He pushed black. Now let's run the local math. Witness Ken dropped a geographical fact on the news that blows this case wide open. He noted it is barely 4 miles from the alleged crime scene to the Marsh Harbor docks, where our guy finally showed up at roughly 4 a.m. 4 miles over 8 to 10 hours. Ken has monitored that exact channel for decades. He knows the currents intimately, and 4 miles over 8 hours just does not align with physics. He summarized the whole timeline in one word. Weird, not pointing fingers, just highly suspicious. Weird. That is the exact word a local used when doing the arithmetic. You and I know when a case file just refuses to add up. Take Captain Bill. He was anchored right next to the Soulmate that evening with his crew. He confirmed the maritime weather conditions were absolutely nothing like Brian claimed. I am not talking about the entire Bahamas, the exact waters, that exact night. We have witnesses who were docked right there living it. Yet Brian reported 3-foot waves, 18 to 22 knot winds, and pitch black darkness, hiding his wife. Ken knows 4 miles does not take 8 to 10 hours. Jim Todd noted that at 6:38 p.m., they still had 45 minutes of solid daylight. Captain Bill's crew swore the conditions were completely fine. 3 separate witnesses, 3 different vantage points on that fatal evening. Alone you could maybe explain away these witness statements. But together my gut says they expose the exact same massive timeline gap. Right in the middle sits a green cover-up garment. The official search and rescue teams had zero idea it existed. I am looking at a photo time-stamped 6:34 p.m. plus surveillance records logging 6:38. Then his police statement claims 7:30. It is a missing person timeline gap nobody can legally justify. Now consider that second life jacket. Jim Todd put a crucial piece of physical evidence into the official record that went totally ignored. There were 2 life jackets inside that dinghy. Brian claims he tossed a flotation device over to Lynette. Yet there was a second life jacket right inside the vessel. Jim stated it plainly. You could pick it up and hurl it like a discus for maximum throwing distance. Or even better, slap one on, grab the other, and dive right in. They were just 150 yards from the shoreline. The man is a former United States Marine. He should swim to her. He drags her to the beach. They both survive the water. They recover the lost dinghy when the sun comes up. But none of that happened. He never dropped the anchor. That second life jacket never even touched the salt water. Just 150 yards out, with photos and surveillance video proving it was still broad daylight, a trained Marine simply chose to drift. Stick with me, Jim called it perfectly. If you eliminate alcohol and panic, the reaction to your spouse falling overboard into shallow sunlit water is pure instinct. It is an automatic human response. You drop the heavy anchor. It sits right at your feet, huge and impossible to miss. You heave it overboard to hold your damn position. And you never ever let yourself drift away from the person drowning in the water. But Brian was not drunk. Ken swore in his witness statement that the suspect left the Abaco Inn completely sober. Fully functional. Not impaired at all. Jim originally figured the morning chaos was just a brutal hangover. Then he found out Brian only had 2 drinks over 2.5 hours. His whole theory shifted. And reviewing the file on that green cover-up, my own blood ran cold. What makes Ken's interview so incredibly chilling is this. He is not describing a visibly guilty man. Quiet. Deeply polite. Thankful for quick service. Looked like a disciplined former soldier. 0 red flags stood out. The thing Ken finds so deeply weird is not the suspect's demeanor. It is the math. A suspect acting nervous, erratic, or wild right before a homicide is easy. Witnesses catch that instantly and report it to detectives like me. That erratic behavior immediately becomes core evidence. But a suspect who stays calm, polite, and totally unremarkable, much harder to pin down. Brian Hooker was an absolute ghost at that bar. Ken saw 0 suspicious behavior happening. All we have is cold arithmetic. 4 miles. 8 to 10 hours. The math is a lie. Look at the dead space between the security camera footage and Brian's official police statement. That timeline is physically impossible, plus a green cover-up kept entirely from investigators. While my search and rescue team scoured the ocean for a woman wearing black, it just does not add up. You and I see the truth. The man was calm. The math is not. You and I need to look at Jim Todd's statement. It changes how a detective reads everything here. Brian couldn't tell Jim where Lynette went overboard. Jim pointed out 3 distinct spots right on the shoreline. Every single one visible from the rescue boat. Dead simple landmarks. Fixed points, an experienced sailor on familiar water uses to orient himself. But Brian claimed he was just too confused. He couldn't be sure. Couldn't pinpoint it. Jim chalked it up to booze and sheer exhaustion. Until he found out about the 2 drinks. And that green cover-up. Suddenly, that confusion, that failure to point to a spot, felt entirely different to me. Because any husband who actually watched his wife go overboard in broad daylight, 150 yards out near landmarks, clear as day from the rescue boat, should be able to point a finger. He should be shouting. Right there. Next to that rock. Past the channel marker. But Brian wouldn't point to a single thing. Just kept saying it was confusing. For Jim, that completely shattered the morning's narrative. In my line of work, we keep coming back to one central question. What really happened in that gap? 6:38. The surveillance footage. 7:30. Brian's official police statement. 52 missing minutes. Where were they during that blind spot? The Abaco Inn cameras caught them, leaving at 6:38. Yet Brian claimed they left at 7:30. Where did they go for nearly an hour? Did they hit the Soulmate first? Did the crime happen on land, not water? Did it happen before 7:30? In broad daylight? Did he lie because a 6:50 daylight incident requires very different answers than a 7:30 darkness tragedy? I am not making accusations here. But missing time breeds questions, and detectives digging into the GPS data from his phone and the electronics pulled from the Soulmate are primed to answer them. Because digital footprints don't lie. That window of movement left a breadcrumb trail. The Apple Watch forensics might just crack it wide open. A United States Coast Guard officer personally called Lynette's mother to confirm they recovered the watch. It tracked every single heartbeat, every location ping, every physical movement, every plunge into water. If that watch was on her wrist, leaving the inn at 6:38, we have her path. We know exactly when she boarded that dinghy. It logged the exact water temperature the second she broke the surface. It tracked her spiking pulse in the minutes following. And it captured the exact second her signal died. Police are ripping through that digital evidence right now. Brian's missing timeline might already be solved. That watch permanently recorded the real story. We just need to see what it says. Now stick with me, Ken's statement changes something else. The question of how Brian settled the tab. The bartender claimed he used a card for round one. A lot of people tracking this missing person case closely. Even those tuning into Ashley Banfield's broadcast insist Brian paid in cash. To an investigator, that distinction is massive. Cards leave timestamps. They build a solid paper trail showing cops exactly when the register opened and down to the penny what he spent. Cash is a ghost. If he used bills, we have zero receipt to lock down the exact timing of that drink. No hard proof of the specific minute he was leaning on that bar. The police inquiry into that evening at the Abaco Inn remains wide open. But card or cash, the bartender had a front row seat. His name is Ken. He gave his statement to the press. And as a cop, what he described that night screams red flags. Let's piece this together. There's a dark detail in their domestic history that ties perfectly to what Ken witnessed. Brian Hooker was remarkably calm. Polite. Grateful. No red flags. You and I are opening a cold file today. Lynette's mother, Darlene, spent years bracing for that devastating phone call. Not weeks, not months, years. I know the cycle all too well. Lynette fleeing home, staying a bit, then returning to him. That final time she fled home, it was surviving a strangulation. She had the bruises. Took photos for evidence for her own memory. She hunted for work. She desperately tried breaking clean. But she went back. And then Brian, following that assault, told her he wished he'd finished the job and tossed her overboard. He threatened her right on their boat before April 4th. Darlene put it on record. She stated it publicly. Of course, Brian Hooker denies doing anything wrong. His defense lawyer claims absolute innocence. But a mother's statement holds real weight. Just 1 month before she vanished, Lynette sobbed on the phone, telling her mother she was completely done. 1 month later. Then a Saturday night at the Abaco Inn, sitting right beside the man who promised to throw her body into the sea. The bartender Ken served him twice. Never even spotted Lynette. Now, you and I need to examine the aftermath. Brian Hooker gets arrested. April 8th. Interrogated for 3 long hours. Then released uncharged April 13th. He tells NBC, "Lynette is my life." To CBS, he says, "I believe people have lasted in the Bahamas after falling overboard for days and even weeks." Then to ABC, "My one job was to look out for her, and we all know he failed miserably." 3 interviews. 3 shifting emotional states. To a detective, those look like perfectly calibrated performances. He swore he would stay and search. Yet, he fled the Bahamas, April 16th. Cadaver dogs touched down that exact same day. Meanwhile, Lynette's daughter Carly rushed right into the fire. Carly hit the island. She gave my colleagues formal statements and physically walked those shores. She headed to their boat. The Soulmate sat alone on the dock and whispered into the void, "Hey, Mom. I'm here wherever you are." Then she bagged the evidence of a life, a headband, an L necklace, a handmade frame. She carried fragments of her mother home. But she vowed to return for answers, to dig up the cold truth of what really went down on that black water, April 4th. Before that final photo, Carly, because her return to the Bahamas was purely investigative, doing the police work herself, she went straight back to the Soulmate. Sitting alone on that dock, staring at the crime scene, her mother called home. She just said, "Hey, Mom, I'm here wherever you are." Then she started gathering her mother's abandoned personal items. That headband, the diamond L necklace, a homemade picture frame, and a tiny piece her grandmother carefully sewed. She brought pieces of Lynette back, and she made it clear she's returning to hunt for answers, not just grieve. Carly has relentlessly pushed the same crucial questions since April 5th. Why? Row in the opposite direction. Why claim her cover-up was black when it was green? Why does camera footage show 6:38 When he swore 7:30, what happened in that missing hour? In an interrogation room, those questions break suspects. And this 28-year-old woman flying toward danger while her stepfather fled is out there demanding the truth. While Brian hides out in Michigan, dogs are actively searching the shorelines, detectives are pulling watch data, and that massive timeline gap remains wide open. Here is the raw case status. Day 19. Brian Hooker sits in Michigan. Still an official, named suspect, directly confirmed by the police commissioner. No charges yet, but definitely not cleared. Stick with me here. There's one massive piece of evidence from the Soulmate that hasn't been properly analyzed yet. Lynette wore a very specific gold chain. A heavy diamond L. Carly told investigators her mother never took it off. It was her absolute signature piece, the kind of everyday jewelry that essentially becomes a second skin. My instincts flared when I read this, that necklace was found on the Soulmate. Not drowned. Not lost. On board. If she accidentally fell from that dinghy wearing her chain, and the deep ocean swallowed her, that necklace goes with her. Unless it was violently removed. Unless it came off before she ever hit the water. Unless somebody planted it back on that deck. My old colleagues haven't officially confirmed or denied that detail. I'm laying out the facts here exactly as they were reported. By the family and citizen sleuths who have torn this evidence apart piece by piece. That initialed necklace was found right on the Soulmate, not on Lynette. Every device yanked from that vessel, phones, tablets, the DVR, is currently under forensic review. Every single text, every web search, every last GPS coordinate, all locked down and time stamped under warrant. That Apple Watch, a U.S. Coast Guard officer called Lynette's mother directly to confirm they had it. Forensics is pulling that data right now. The U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation remains wide open, meaning Brian could face another arrest. Let's look at the timeline together. The gap between 6:38 and 7:30, the tape versus the husband's statement, makes zero sense. Ken knows those currents. Jim Todd knows leaving out that cover-up is a massive red flag. Plus, a random tourist snapping the sunset caught something huge at 6:34 p.m. That picture shows Lynette Hooker in a green wrap just 4 minutes before the final confirmed sighting of her alive. Yet Brian told every single rescuer looking for his wife to spot a black two-piece. The photographic evidence screams green. The suspect insisted on black. And they never found Lynette's body. Let's map out this crime scene one final time. Because when my detective brain lines up the hard facts, I don't see a grieving husband who lost his wife to a tragic accident at sea. I see a chain of cold evidence that simply refuses to resolve. The tape logs 6:38. Brian claimed 7:30. 52 missing minutes. The photo proves she wore green. Brian fed every search grid a black two-piece. He never mentioned that green wrap to a single soul hunting for her. Later, Jim Todd told Brian to point to exactly where Lynette went into the water. The husband couldn't do it. Blamed it on confusion. A trained Marine, sailing familiar territory, who should have pinpointed the exact drop zone, suddenly had amnesia. Ken knows those local currents. He swears a 4-mile trip shouldn't drag out for 8 to 10 hours. He's watched that exact crossing for years. The drop anchor stayed totally dry. That spare life jacket never even touched the ocean. A sober veteran sitting 150 yards offshore in broad daylight, and he just drifted away. Her signature L necklace turned up on the boat's deck, not around her neck. We have the Apple Watch. The lab is pulling its secrets. Brian promised he'd stay and look. He bolted before the search dogs even arrived. Carly flew in. Brian fled home. Every single fact here has a verified source. Every piece is in the case file. But that glaring gap between the surveillance tape and his official police statement, still a total black hole. What happened? Between 6:38 p.m. and 4:02 a.m. Forensics is decoding that answer right now. Lynette Hooker always called the sea her sanctuary. She logged 10 years of that passion on her page, The Sailing Hookers. Pictures of sea turtles, golden sunsets, and the unmistakable glow of a woman who had found exactly where she belonged. 55 years old. Fit strong, a lifelong swimmer. On the evening of April 4th, a bartender named Ken poured the husband his final round. Brian looked over and said, "Thank you for the fast service." Just 4 minutes after a random tourist caught Lynette in that green wrap, The dock camera caught them walking toward the water. He claimed they left at 7:30. The tape says 6:38. He swore 7:30. The wrap was green. The suspect insisted it was black. 4 miles. 8 to 10 hours. The anchor never deployed. Second life vest completely untouched. A trained veteran 150 yards out in broad daylight just drifted off. 52 minutes. Green versus black. You and I both know the truth about Lynette is buried right inside that gap. The watch recorded it. The devices hold the answers. That timeline hole the suspect refuses to explain. My gut says forensics already knows. The public just hasn't seen the file yet. If you know anything about Lynette Hooker's final hours, call the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the U.S. Coast Guard. Both criminal investigations remain wide open. I open the file. Lynette Hooker, 55. Missing from Onsted, Michigan, April 4, 2026. Hit subscribe and leave your theories below. What do you think happened in those missing 52 minutes? My investigation relies solely on cold documented facts and statements tied directly to named witnesses. Everyone we talk about is innocent until proven guilty. Brian Hooker has not been formally charged with any crime. His lawyer makes it clear he absolutely denies doing anything wrong here. My job is to walk you through the evidence. I don't prosecute, I don't advocate, or guess beyond the official reports. We are tracking a trail where documented evidence exposes exactly what someone wanted, kept deeply buried.